It wasn't an algorithm. You need to understand that first. The images and sounds you were shown, the cryptic numbers that appeared in your recommendations, that was a signal, a tuning fork resonating with something already inside of you. You were chosen because you are one of the few who senses that the reality we see is just a fraction of the whole story, a beautiful, hypnotic, but fragmented echo. For months, you've been collecting those echoes, feeling their power without understanding the source. Consider this video the first translation of that source. This is not another theory or a guess. This is the blueprint, the very architecture of the philosophy you've been subconsciously drawn to. What you are about to see is the key that elevates you from a mere spectator of the mystery to an active participant in its unfolding. The puzzle pieces are in your hands. Now, let's begin to assemble them.
Consider the perimeter of your own mind. It is lined with walls built entirely by the thoughts of others. You must understand this fundamental truth. Not everything that contains you was chosen by you. Some of these barriers were shaped elsewhere, far from your sight. They were drawn by hands you have never seen, molded by sentences spoken casually over dinner tables, by gestures repeated until they feigned neutrality. You moved through these spaces believing yourself free, yet with every breath you inhaled their geometry, allowing the very air of the room to etch a threshold into your mind. You didn't notice. Or maybe you did, too late, when these walls had already become part of you, internal, intimate, almost affectionate. These are not walls of brick or mortar, but psychic structures, invisible meridians drawn by foreign thoughts that you now carry as if they were your birthright, though they were never forced upon you with violence. Quite the opposite, in fact. They seeped in softly, as advice, as habit, as that specific tone of voice that whispered, "This is how it is done," or "We simply do not say that," or "That is not appropriate." And the most formidable prisons are often constructed from kind words, designed to shelter you from realities you were never permitted to conceive. This creates a conditioning of space, a disposition born not of will, but of exposure. Long before you inhabit a room, its dimensions have already begun to train you. The excessive order of objects, the symmetry of frames, the echo of footsteps on plaster, all of it speaks, teaching you to think with your body and yield to a logic you did not write, yet which writes itself effortlessly upon you. This process has no clear beginning. There is no moment where you can say, "From here on, I began to obey external forms." Because psychic construction is continuous, drop by drop, arrangement by arrangement, external spaces become internal ones, rules become reflex, structures become rhythm, and you, at some point, begin to move within yourself according to a path you don't recognize, but which you follow obediently, believing it is yours. And if in the previous text we brushed against those inner territories that seem to emerge from implicit memories and invisible maps, here we move in the opposite direction, toward what has been inscribed within us from the outside, with patience and precision, until it almost seems our own. It is not a question of weakness, but of erosion. Even stone eventually concedes to the persistence of water. The thoughts of others, those repeated, shared, and enforced, gradually wear down your edges until your cognitive space is defined by subtraction, by what was withheld, denied, or mocked. Thought contracts, and in that narrowing, we often mistake limitation for maturity. In addition, there are concepts you cannot articulate, not because they are too complex, but because they do not exist within the limited vocabulary you were given. Language does not only name the world, it delimits it. This is exactly how induced cognitive space operates, not as censorship, but as absence, not as prohibition, but as omission. An entire wing of your mental house was never built, simply because no one ever told you it could exist. And now you move through these rooms as if they were yours. You recognize the furniture, you know the path from one thought to the next. But if you try to deviate, to sketch a new pattern, you feel a sudden resistance. Not physical, but deep. It is the wall of, "That's not how it's done," of, "This won't work," of, "It doesn't make sense." A voice that no longer needs to be spoken aloud because it already lives within your throat. You speak with words handed to you in advance. You react according to rules that feel obvious. But you must ask, obvious to whom? And if something begins to shift, it is not by chance. It is the result of accumulation. A silent tension works at the margins. A slight misalignment is all it takes. A thought that refuses to align. A shadow moving where there should only be diffuse light. And from there, a possibility opens, not of escape, but of observation. A space from which to see the limits instead of crossing them blindly. A fixed point from which to measure distance, not to quantify, but to begin to feel it. From there, perhaps, you can begin to observe. Do this without the urgency to free yourself, without the loud rhetoric of deprogramming. Proceed with the precision of someone patiently surveying every line etched into their own map. Recognizing the boundary doesn't mean you have to tear it down. It means you can name it. You can know where your thought ends and someone else's voice begins. You can distinguish, if only for a moment, your native tongue from the one whispered to you over time. It is a form of inner cartography, inverse architecture, a simple yet potent gesture, tracing mental boundaries not to enclose yourself more tightly, but to locate an exit. A door that was never planned, a barely sketched opening, a diagonal possibility of thought. And don't expect a revelation. No blinding illumination is coming. Only a slow misalignment, a different way of standing, of walking through yourself without following the corridor, of hearing a thought and recognizing that it does not resemble you, of saying no, even if only silently, even if only once, even if without reason. And perhaps at that point, you finally cease building walls and begin tentatively to frame an opening. See you in the next episode.